Hi everyone, it's Christine here from Ever After Paper Crafts, and today I have a fun card to share with you using some no-line coloring with watercoloring and my favorite thing, stamps. So let's go ahead and I'll pull this card up here so you can see it. This is the card we're going to be working on today. As you can see, I've colored two fairies with the no-line coloring technique, and I will explain all about that in just a moment. I also created this fun sky background with a cloud stencil and some distress inks, and we will do that quickly on camera as well. And finally, I heat embossed the sentiment with some white embossing powder. So that's the card. The stamp set that I use is from My Favorite Things, and it's called Fairy Happy, and it's an adorable stamp set. I'm in love with it. You can also purchase coordinating dies separately if you are interested. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to do the background with the clouds, and I'm just going to do this very quickly because I really want to show you the no-line coloring technique. So what I did is I first cut out a Bristol Smooth cardstock, a stitched rectangle from a stitched rectangle die. This one happens to be from Lawn Fawn, but you can use any rectangle die you have in your stash, or simply trim your paper to whatever size you wish with your paper trimmer. I cut mine. I knew I wanted my panel to be the full size of a front A2 size card, so I just cut this to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. That's what the die cut it out to. Now I'm going to go ahead and bring over some scratch paper here and get my cardstock situated here. All right, now I'm going to be using this cloud stencil from My Favorite Things. And this is seriously, I've said this in videos before, the best $6 I've ever spent. This cloud stencil is just fabulous. Now I decided today, instead of just doing a blue sky, I decided to mix it up and have a little bit of fun. So as you can see from the original card, I did some yellow and pink, like kind of like a magical, maybe a sunset or something like that. So I used scattered straw and sponge sugar distress inks for this background. So I started with the yellow here, and I just put a little sponge dauber on the bottom of one of my ink blending tools. And now I'm just going to start on the stencil and very slowly in a circular motion work my way up to the top of the stencil, which will put the ink directly on the paper. Hopefully that makes sense. Now what's awesome about this particular cloud stencil, I keep calling it a cloud die, I'm so sorry guys, cloud stencil rather, is that you can turn it. There are 4 different cloud patterns on the cloud stencil, which make it really fun. You can really kind of alternate what your sky is going to look like, get very different patterns going, and it's so much fun. So make sure though that you start with your ink on the stencil itself. This will make your fingers very inky because you're touching the stencil as you go along, and you'll have to clean your stencil of course, but that way your sky won't be too blobby and have too much ink going directly on it. So that's looking really, really pretty, I think, for the yellow. Let's bring in some pink now. And again, this is sponge sugar distress ink. I'm just going to grab a different sponge dauber here and just come in lightly with the pink. Just very lightly, again, starting on that stencil and working my way up. I'm going to turn my stencil again to create another fun look here. I really love how MFT thought this stencil through and has really created 4 awesome different looks for your clouds. It's really, really fun. And let's go here like so. And this should finish it up for us. And I will pull the stencil away now and show you what this looks like. How pretty is that? I just think it's absolutely lovely what you are able to create with this stencil die. And let me pull it up to the camera just a little bit better there. So as you can see, we have some light yellow fading up into some light pink, and it's very, very pretty. Okay, let's go ahead and set this aside. Let's clean our stencil off quickly here, and I just use a baby wipe for that. So we'll just clean that off, clean my fingers off as well, because like I said, when you're starting with that ink on the stencil itself, it does get your fingers nice and inky. All right, let's go ahead and put our distress inks away. And now we will move on to the no line coloring, which is a really fun technique. I will tell you, I was so scared to try this at first because it seems so complicated. And while, to be perfectly honest, it is a little bit more difficult than coloring with normal black ink, The results are just something very unique and very fun, in my opinion. So let me bring the original card back over so you can see here the two fairies that have been colored with no line coloring. I am just going to color one on the video. I'm going to color this one. I will call out the name of my zig markers as we go along here, but I will be using zig markers and a water brush to watercolor paint this fairy with the no line technique. So how do you do a no line technique? The first thing that you need to decide is what your coloring medium is going to be. In my case, it's watercoloring, of course, because I can't stop watercoloring these days. So I wanted to pick an ink that was watercolor friendly, but very light in color. That's what gives you that no line idea, where the lines are so light that you're almost coloring over them and creating the lines with your coloring. So what I did is I chose Distress Ink Antique Linen, and I just simply stamped my image onto Canson XL watercolor paper with Antique Linen ink. I did use a MFT for this because the watercolor paper is quite thick, and sometimes you don't get a great impression the first time around, and also the Distress Ink isn't the best for stamping, so to speak. So I had to go over it just a couple times. Now, I decided after I made the card to play around with Distress Oxide Ink in Antique Linen, and I got really great results. Let me pull this up here. This was done using Distress Oxide Antique Linen ink, and these on the card were made using regular Distress ink. So it's not really a huge difference. The only main difference really is how it's stamped, and the Distress Oxides, of course, stamp beautifully. You can stamp quite easily with them. Now let me bring over one that I have colored with regular black waterproof ink, and on the right here, and then the one on the left, which is done with the no line technique, just so you can kind of see a difference in what we're trying to accomplish here. This is just our normal coloring with regular black Hero Arts dye ink, and it's lovely, and that's how I do 90% if not more of my coloring. But sometimes it is fun to just give it a no line look, and as you can see on the left here, it's just very soft. You don't see those bright harsh black lines in the image, and it's just a much softer look. So sometimes when I want something a little bit different, I'll go with the no line technique. So I just did want to show you quickly here the difference in those when they're right next to each other, so you can really see the difference between no line coloring and regular coloring with normal black ink. Now my battery's getting low on my camera there, so I had to plug that in. I apologize for the shaking. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and get started. I will call out, as I said, the colors as we go through here, and I'm going to start with her hair. I always seem to start with hair, and I'm going to work in sections. Now remember, your lines are going to be much lighter, so you're gonna have to really pay attention to where you are coloring so you don't kind of go out of the lines and that sort of thing, because the lines are very light. This technique really makes your coloring kind of front and center, and I really like that about this technique. It's fun. So for her hair, I am using light brown and yellow. So I'm going to work in sections as I always do. So I'm doing this section of hair first, and I'm coming in with the light brown, which is the darkest of my colors. Always start with your darkest color. So I'm coming in with the light brown, and now I'm going to come in with the yellow, and in a circular motion, pull that light brown color up into the white space that is left behind. And now I'm going to take my water brush here, which is just a zig water brush with a very fine tip. I definitely recommend using either a paintbrush that you dip in water or a water brush that has a very, very, very small tip, especially when you're doing no line coloring. This will allow you to really get into those small spaces and not go outside of the faint lines of the image. Now there's a slight, very hard to see with the no line coloring, the lighter ink, but there's a slight look right here that shows that this is actually where the part is. So I'm going to put some dark light brown ink there, which is the darkest of my inks, and then I'm going to put some down in here as well, where it's going to be darkest. I'm now going to take my yellow and pull this brown ink up and down into this white space that's remaining, and then of course use the water brush to fill in the space completely. And now with this technique too, you can see the lines are still there. You can still see the lines of her hair delineated, but it's very soft and very, very faint, very light. So your coloring really is the main event, if you will. So now I'm just coming here to this section of hair that's kind of under her face. I came in with some brown, and now I'm going to come in with some yellow and just pull this up into the empty space here. And then of course use my water brush to pull it all together. And isn't that lovely? I just realized I'm not zoomed in. Let me zoom in. I'm so sorry, guys. I just realized that. So this is what it's looking like right now. It's not completely dry. When it dries, that harsh line up against the line of her face where the ink registers and sits most pronouncedly is not going to be visible. So don't worry about that. It will dry and those lines will smooth out. Now I'm going to come over to the left side of her face and do the same thing. It's going to be darkest kind of at the tip, at the bottom rather, of her hair, as well as up here where the part is. I'm going to come in with my yellow now and just pull this darker brown color out. Do the same thing down here. And then we'll simply use our water brush to pull it all together. And now we want to come down here as well with our light brown and around her face, just like we did on the other side, and then down here at the very bottom tip of her hair. Come in with your yellow to blend this out. And then finally use your water brush to pull it all together. And there you have lovely no-line hair. All right, let's go ahead now and do her little dress. I used green for the little apron that looks like an apron of leaves. It's so super cute. Love these images from my favorite things so much. They're so darling. So we'll pull this down here. I'm just, as you can see, I'm literally just scribbling on just like I normally would. There's no change in how I'm coloring. I just have to look at the image a little bit more carefully and be a little bit more careful about going out of the lines, you know, of course, and sort of putting that shading exactly where I want it, since there won't be dark lines to assist me. But other than that, there's no difference to how I'm actually going about doing the coloring. The light sources are still going to be in the same place. The shadows are going to be in the same place. I just need to be very, you know, a little bit more careful in how I put them down. That's all. That's the only difference really with this technique. And sometimes if you're getting old like me, you have to look a little closer to the paper as well, because it can be just a little bit more difficult to see. So now let's go ahead, and we've done her little green leaf-like apron, so to speak. Now we're going to do the hairband here in her hair. So it's going to be darkest on either side at the bottom where the hairband is, as well as up here kind of in the part area as well. And now we'll just take our water brush, and I just used pink there. That's the only color that I used for her hairband. And we'll just use our water brush here to blend this together and create that really pretty highlight look that we're looking for when we do our watercolor painting. Okay, there we go. There's our hairband. Let me just, I missed a little spot right there. Okay. Now let's go ahead and do the bottom, like her actual dress. And to do that, I'm just using also pink, the same color that I used for the hairband. So I'm just going to come in and come around the apron. There'll certainly be shading. That apron will cast a shadow on the dress there. So underneath where that apron sits will be it'll be darker. So we'll put some highlight there. And then of course on both sleeves. And now we'll go ahead and take our water brush, pull that pink out here of the sleeve. The sleeve is such a tiny space, you're not going to see too much in the way of dramatic, if you will, shading there. And that's okay. In small spaces, don't stress yourself out, because you can only do so much in the small spaces, so don't really worry about that. And sometimes I just color them directly with the marker, like I will with her shoes in a moment, because they're just way too small to really get any shading done. All right, so now we're just coming around this dress here and very carefully pulling this pink marker ink, painting it out into the remainder of the white space of her dress. And when we're all done, we'll have a very nicely shaded little dress where it will definitely be darker underneath where that apron hits. Okay. And that is looking good. Now let's go ahead and just do her shoes while we're at it here. And like I said, I'm just going to color these with the marker because they are so small. There's really no sense in worrying about shading or using our water brush because there's just not enough room there to do so. All right, let's do this flower as well. I also did the little flower that she's holding with pink. So I'm just gonna put a little bit of pink right close to the middle of the flower, and then I'll use my water brush here to pull it out into the petals. So there'll just be a very, very, very subtle shading on the flower petals here. Very subtle, probably won't even show up on camera, but in person there is definitely a little bit of a subtle shading there. Let me just, missed a few spaces here. There we go. There we go. Okay, and now I'm just going to take yellow and just color that in the middle. Okay, now we have left to do is her wings and her skin tone. Let's do the skin tone first. We're going to use flesh color and blush, which is what I always use when I'm doing Caucasian skin tones. And let's go ahead. Now it's going to certainly be darkest underneath her hair where her bangs come down, and then just sort of around her face. She's facing to the right, so the light source is probably coming in this way, and that's where I have imagined it. I'm now going to take the flesh color and pull that, blend it with that blush color and pull it into the open space, the open white space that's left behind here. And then we will be taking our water brush and pulling it all together and mixing it in the middle. There we have it. Now for her arms, they are so tiny that I won't be using a water brush. I'm going to come in with the blush on both of her arms here, and then come in with the flesh color and just blend them together, just the markers themselves. I'm not going to fuss with the water brush simply because it is so tiny of a space. Same thing with her legs. As you can see, they are so tiny that it's just going to give us heartburn if we try to get shading in there with a water brush, because it's just too tiny to fuss with. So we'll just get very, very subtle shading, just mixing the two markers together without any water, and that works fine too. Finally, we need to do her little wings. So I just took a light blue as sort of like a shadow, because I wanted them to almost appear kind of transparent or see-through, but even if something's white, it's going to have a little bit of a shadow to it. So I chose light blue, and then I'm just going to give my water brush a squeeze here and really let that water flow to really lighten up that color of that dark blue. So it's very, very, very subtle, and just looks kind of like a highlight, like a shadow that you might see on something that's actually white. So just be kind of liberal with the water there in those wings. And now we have to do the wings on the other side. So we'll do the same thing, like so. And we'll do the same thing here with our water brush, just being very liberal again with that water, really pulling it out into that white space. And there we go. Very, very, very simple. I'm going to give a little bit more squeeze of the water brush and just pull this color out just a little bit more even than I already have. Because like I said, we really just want this to be a very subtle light blue. All right. And there we have it. So the last step that I do before, of course, coating everything with Wink of Stella, which I love to do, is I take a black gel pen. This happens to be a Jelly Roll Fine Sakura pen, and I got this at Michael's. And I just color in her eyes and smile. And of course, that's in the original stamp. I'm just going over it, but it's so light in the with the Distress ink for the no line technique that it kind of gets almost colored over and it's hard to see. So I just take a black gel pen just to add some emphasis to that face. And that's it. That is how you no line watercolor. It's actually a lot easier than it looks. And I think that the end result is really fun. Again, here's another one that I did off camera. And then let me show you one that was done with regular ink, again, just so you can see the difference. See that difference there? How much lighter these are compared to this one. This one is still absolutely lovely and will go on a card, I promise you. It's just fun to sometimes mix it up is all. And finally, again, here is that finished card. Let me bring it up here. I don't think that the glitters, I'm gonna get it to show up on camera. It'll be on the pictures on my blog, and I will link to my blog in the description box of this video. But I I've put glitter on their wings and flowers and their little dresses, just for fun. I love my Wink of Stella glitter pen, so I use it all the time. And again, here's those little fairies all colored up with the no-line watercoloring technique. So I hope that you enjoyed this video and you'll give some no-line coloring a try. It really is easy. Don't be like me and be afraid to try it for so long. I really wish I'd started trying it a lot sooner because it's really fun and the results are something fun, unique, and different from everyday coloring. So thanks so much as always, guys, for stopping by, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye-bye.